Yeah, we're online now.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisance. All glories to Jagat Krishna Prabhupada, all glories to Gurudev, and all glories to His Holiness SVAYAM BHAGAVAN KESHAVA SWAMI Maharaj Ki Jai, who is here with us today. We are very much blessed. There is a saying that if you have something good going on in your life, it means you slept in a very good position the previous night. So I guess all of us slept in a very nice position. We should make sure we sleep the same place every night. We have His Holiness here with us. Maharaj has been with us few times, and apart from this particular platform, most of us have been following Maharaj in various different media platforms. So it is a very wonderful privilege to have him here today with us. So Maharaj does not need an introduction, and I may not even be able to introduce him. So Maharaj, please, without further ado, we may put the verse on the screen and then you take it over.
Sure. Thank you so much. My obeisances to all the Vaishnavas, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you so much, Sahadev Prabhu and all the devotees for again welcoming me so warmly. It's a real honor to be with all of you. I really feel nourished discussing Bhagavatam with all of you who are real. Well, they say, Muhura ho rasika bhuvi bhavuka, that you must try to relish the Bhagavatam in the company of those who know how to taste the Bhagavatam. So I really feel that with all of you. So today we are reading about pure devotional service, the change in heart. And this is really, really a beautiful chapter in the Bhagavatam, perhaps one of my favorite chapters. And today we're reading from the very first text, text number 1. So I'll just do the invocation, recite the verse, the word for word, and then we'll read the translation and commentary, and then have a short discussion. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from text number 1. Shri Sukha Uvacha. Evameta nigaditam prishtavan yadbhavan mama nrinam yan mriyamananam manusyeshu manishinam. Shri Sukha Uvacha Evameta nigaditam prishtavan yadbhavan mama nrinam yan mriyamananam manusyeshu manishinam. Shri Sukha Uvacha Evametan Nikaditam Prishtavan Yadbhavan Mama Nrinam Yan Mriyamananam Manusyeshu Manishinam. Word for word. Shri Sukha Uvacha, Shri Sukadev Goswami said, Evam, so, etat, all these, Nigaditam, answered, Prishtavan, as you inquired, Yat, what? Bhavan, your good self, Mama, unto me, Nrinam, of the human being, Yat, one, Mriyamananam, on the threshold of death, Manusheshu, amongst the human beings, Manishinam, of the intelligent men. Translation. Sri Sukadev Goswami said, Maharaj Parikshit, as you have inquired from me as to the duty of an intelligent man who is on the threshold of death, so I have answered you. Purport. In human society all over the world, there are millions and billions of men and women, and almost all of them are less intelligent because they have very little knowledge of spirit soul. Almost all of them have a wrong conception of life, for they identify themselves with the gross and subtle material bodies, which they are not, in fact. They may be situated in different high and low positions in the estimation of human society, but one should know definitely that unless one inquires about his own self beyond the body and the mind, all his activities in human life are total failures. Therefore, out of thousands and thousands of men, one may inquire about his spirit self and thus consult the revealed scriptures like Vedanta Sutras, Bhagavad Gita, and SRIMAD Bhagavatam. But in spite of reading and hearing such scriptures, unless one is in touch with a realized spiritual master, he cannot actually realize the nature of the self. And out of thousands and hundreds of thousands of men, someone may know what Lord Krishna is, in fact. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that Lord Krishna, out of his causeless mercy, prepared the Vedic literatures in the incarnation of Vyasadeva for reading by the intelligent class of men in a human society which is almost totally forgetful of the genuine relation with Krishna. Even such an intelligent class of men may be forgetful in their relation with the Lord. The whole Bhakti Yoga process is therefore a revival of the lost relation. This revival is possible in the human form of life, which is obtained only out of the evolutionary cycle of 8.4 million species of life. The intelligent class of human being must take a serious note of this opportunity. Not all human beings are intelligent, so the importance of human life is not always understood. Therefore, manishinam, meaning thoughtful, is particularly used here. A manishinam person like Maharaj Parikshit must therefore take to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna and fully engage himself in devotional service, hearing, chanting, etc. of the holy name and pastimes of the Lord, which are all Hari Kathamrita. This action is especially recommended when one is preparing for death. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnanatirmirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Varijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Nice to see you all. Sadhguru, is it possible to get sharing rights?
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah. So Hare Krishna, everyone. Again, we are reading the second canto of the Bhagavatam. It's very, very wonderful because, as we know, at the end of the first canto of the Bhagavatam, Parikshit just asks this question. It's like, you know, sometimes they say if you have one wish or you can ask one question, which question should you ask? So Parikshit just like hits the nail on the head. He just asks this question, which is just gets to the root of everything, that what is the duty of someone who is about to die? And basically in this verse here, in the beginning of the 3rd chapter, Sukadev Goswami said, that's it, I've answered it. In 2 chapters, I've answered everything. And the amazing thing that Sukadev Goswami does in these first 2 chapters, in which he said he's answered everything, he actually has answered everything, because if you look closely at the Bhagavatam, he hasn't just given the ultimate answer, but what he's actually done is he's taken, Parikshit may realize it or not, probably he does, he's actually taken Parikshit through a whole journey of different processes of self-realization, and he's finally come to the point where he's just hit the nail on the head and just said, Bhakti Yoga, pure devotional service, the change in heart, this is the ultimate thing that you need to do. You see, Sukadev Goswami is an expert preacher. When a preacher is in a room and someone asks a question, the preacher realizes that he's not just speaking to that one person, but he's speaking to the whole room. Nowadays, a preacher is realizing he's not just speaking to the questioner, not just the whole room, but he's speaking to the whole world, because everything goes on the internet. So a preacher is incredibly, incredibly sensitive. So what Sukadev Goswami has done is he knows that Parikshit is ready for the ultimate answer, that Bhakti Yoga is the ultimate process. But Sukadev Goswami is looking out and he sees representatives of all the different darshans of Vedanta. He's seeing those who are into mystic yoga, he's seeing those who are into Sankhya, he's seeing those who are into Karma Mimamsa, he's seeing those who worship the universal form. And therefore, what Sukadev Goswami does is he goes through a progression. And he says, if you want to know what you should do at death, the real thing is you have to make connection. But there are different ways to connect. One way is you can connect through the universal form. In other words, there's a form of God that you can recognize in the world around you immediately and use that as a stepping stone to go further. But then later on, he says there's something further you can do even beyond that, which is that the Lord is not just in the universe, but he's in the microcosm of your own heart. So look for the Lord within, look for the super soul who's dwelling with you, who has been on the journey through this material world with you for many lifetimes. And then he says, and then there are others, and they approach the universal demigods, the controllers of the cosmos. And he says, you can also approach them if you want material things. So like this, he's going step by step, and he's actually establishing that ultimately, these are all ways you can connect, but the ultimate way that you're going to connect is through Bhakti Yoga. Now, I just want to share something with you. One of our beautiful commentators, just give it 1 second. I think my screen is just loading for you. Oh God, I've frozen. Can you hear me, Sadev?
Yes, Maharaj, we can
You
hear
can
you.
hear me. Okay, okay,
Yes.
okay, 1 second. So it had just frozen there for a second. Sorry, just bear with me.
Yeah. Yes.
Can you see a blank white screen?
Yeah, it is.
You
We-
can see the blank white
we
screen.
can see
Okay, great, great. So our different commentators, they help us to understand the Shastra in different ways. And what one of the ancient commentators does is he gives a beautiful depiction of the Bhagavad Gita. And he says the Bhagavad Gita is actually like a jewel box. And what he says is that the first 6 chapters, sorry, that says first. The first 6 chapters of the Gita are like the base of that jewel box, because understanding karma yoga, understanding how to navigate this world and connect your immediate activities are incredibly important. They're the foundation sometimes of spiritual life, because right now, tomorrow, you got to wake up and live in this world. So karma yoga is like the basis, he says, of of this jewel box that the Bhagavad Gita is described as. And then what he says is that the box on the top is like the third 6 chapters, the final 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, which are all about Jnana Yoga. And he says Jnana Yoga is the lid because it's protective. It's basically helping you to be free and detached from the influences of the world. So he says in this way, the first 6 and the final 6 are like the base and the lid of the jewel box. But then what he says is that the jewel inside is basically the middle 6 chapters of the Gita, which we know are all about Bhakti Yoga, because we know that Bhakti Yoga is the ultimate treasure that the Bhagavad Gita exists to give. And he also goes further. He says on the lid of the jewel box, which is, you can say, the final of the verses of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says in 1855, Manmana bhava madbhakto, and he says this verse is like an inscription on the lid of the jewel box. And what the inscription on the lid of the jewel box tells us is what is in the contents of that jewel box. And therefore 1855 and the complete middle of the jewel box, which is the actual jewel, i.e. 934, they actually completely match each other because the inscription tells you what's on the inside. And in this way, he establishes that bhakti or devotional service, bhakti yoga, is the ultimate in spiritual practice. Now, when establishing bhakti yoga as the ultimate spiritual practice, the commentators, they do it in different ways. But one of the ways in which they establish the supremacy of bhakti yoga is they do it like this. They say we have to look at investments. They say, when you make an investment in life, there are certain considerations that you have to ask yourself. The first and foremost consideration when making an investment is, what is the return? In other words, what's in it for me? What am I going to get from this investment? That's the first question you ask. The second question they say you should ask when you're making an investment is, what is the rate? Okay, the return may be good, but when am I going to get it back? The third question you have to ask is reachable. Is this investment something I can do? Or is it like you need like £1 million to engage in this investment? It blows me out of the water. Can I actually reach? Is this investment reachable for me? And then the next one is there any restriction on this investment? And the final and very, very important consideration when making any kind of investment is, what is the risk? What if it doesn't work out? If you want to measure the efficacy and the value of investing anything in this life, that may be time, that may be energy, that may be money, that may be your attention. The thing you have to ask yourself is these 5 questions. Then you can understand what's the best investment. The basic problem with people in the world is they invest their time, energy, effort, attention in things without even considering these questions. And therefore, after a lifetime of making investments in so many things, they find themselves impoverished, they find themselves let down, and they find themselves dissatisfied. And, you may end up feeling like you have like a midlife crisis or something, because you're wondering what you did with all your time. The commentators explain that bhakti yoga is the supreme investment because on all 5 of these counts, no other spiritual process and no other activity in the world can compare to bhakti yoga. The first thing is, what is the return of bhakti yoga? love. A pure, unalloyed relationship of love in which you don't have to be fear whether your love will be reciprocated. A type of love in which when you develop that love, it doesn't become boxed into one person, but it goes to that person and then spreads to everyone and everything. An expansive, unending, and most profound type of intense intimacy of love. What could be more valuable than that? Because as we know, the whole world is looking for love. So Bhakti Yoga doesn't just connect you to the Supreme. There are many processes which could connect you to the Supreme, but Bhakti is connecting you to the Supreme in the most intimate way, in the most confidential way. And that love, when awakened with the Supreme, then spreads to everyone and everything. So the return on all counts is something that can't be given by any other process. What is the rate of that return? We remember that Srila Prabhupada said advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on one thing and one thing only, and that is the attitude of the follower. And so even in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, in the first chapter of the second canto, to reassure Parikshit that it's not too late, to reassure Parikshit, he's thinking, I've only got 7 days to live. Am I going to be able to make this investment and get the payback in time? What's the rate of return? How long is it going to take me to realize the fruit of this investment? So if you remember, Sukadev Goswami tells him a story. And this story is meant to reassure him that it's not too late. Anyone remember what that story is?
Is this a story about Maharaj Katwanga?
Katvanga, exactly. Thank you. Yes, he tells the story of Katvanga who realized it in a moment. So it has the potentiality of paying back in a moment if we find that sincerity. Sometimes what keeps me going in japa is like, even when you feel like you're chanting broken names, you carry on and you pray to Krishna, I'm going to keep searching, I'm going to keep searching, because if I find that one pure name, then Bhagavatam Chaitanya Charitamrita says, Eka Nama Krishna Sarva Papa Kshoy, that one name of Krishna, if uttered in sincerity, can crush everything else. And so it is really like that. Bhakti yoga, it's like you got to keep your eyes open. It appears and it can appear at any moment, that connection of love. And so the rate is very, very promising. It can be very, very quick. Desha maham samudharta mrityu samsarasagarat, Krishna says, I very quickly, very swiftly deliver my devotee. Now, is it reachable? Maybe I've missed the boat. Maybe I had to do it at a certain time. Every investment seems to have a window of opportunity in which you got to grab it. But in Bhakti Yoga, the Bhagavatam shows people who did it from the womb to the tomb, literally. In other words, it's reachable, it's available, it's accessible, and it's reachable at any time in your life. Some great saints did it in their youth. Some did it when they were married. Some did it when they were about to retire, like Dhritarashtra. And some did it at the last moment when they just called out to the Lord and they received protection. So therefore, it's reachable at any time in your life. There's not a specific moment for this investment. This investment can be done at any moment. And someone may ask, in Bhakti Yoga, is there any restriction? There's no restriction, because you don't require no material qualification. In fact, Kunti Maharani says sometimes material qualifications can become your disqualification because they don't allow you to approach with humility. So not only do you not require material qualifications, but sometimes not having any material qualifications becomes a very good qualification, because the only qualification you need is humility. And this, in this age, when most of us are practically unqualified, our disqualification or lack of qualification becomes our biggest qualification, because even our great saint Narottam sings, Mosama Patita Prabhu Na Pai Beal. You are Patita Pavan, Lord Chaitanya, and therefore my claim is first, because no one can be considered more unqualified than me. And therefore there's no restriction in this investment. And not just that, someone may say, yeah, but it's risky, I may miss out on something. No, you never miss out on anything, because bhakti is joyful now. It's joyful in its maturity, and it's joyful in its perfection. And not just that, if one, therefore no one misses out on any joy in their life. And not just that, if at the end of this life you don't manage to finish up this investment, while all other investments generally go to zero and you have to begin again, Krishna says, you continue on. Neha bikramanaso sti pratyavayo navidyate, there's nothing to lose. And so what Sukadev is doing with Parikshit and all the sages who are assembled at the bank of the Ganga to hear this conversation, Sukadev is systematically establishing that bhakti is the most powerful thing one can be doing in their life. Remember, it's like a jewel box. And that jewel box, while supported by a base and a lid, ultimately the treasure is within. And that treasure is so simple, so beautiful, so sublime, and so incredibly valuable that it will actually fulfill everything that we're looking for. So here in these first verses of the third chapter, in this chapter, what Sukadev Goswami is going to do is he's going to talk more now. He's established bhakti is the ultimate goal, and then he's going to explain how to utilize all your limbs, how to use all your senses, how to use all of your capacities in service to the Supreme Lord. And in this way, he is answering Parikshit's question, what is the duty of someone who is about to leave this world? When I read this part of the Bhagavatam, one thing that I really draw as the main question. You see, when I read Shastra, one of the things I ask myself whenever I read a verse or a passage, I say, what's the bottom line here? Like, what's the main teaching that I'm supposed to take away from this? And for me, when I read this verse and these sets of verses where Sukadev is facing the inevitability of his death head on, then what comes to me is this beautiful disposition of a Vaishnav. That a Vaishnav is loving life and simultaneously embracing death. Now, some of you it may sound familiar because I've written a book like this called Loving Life, Embracing Death. It was about one of our monks. His name was Janakinath, and at a certain point in his life, he was diagnosed with cancer. And when I was observing him in his final days, this is what occurred to me very, very strongly, that the disposition of a Vaishnav is that they know how to love life and they know simultaneously how to embrace death. Now, this is actually incredible, because if someone is loving life, then the general conception of people in the world would be that, how can you then embrace death? Then you wouldn't want to embrace death because life is so amazing. Why would you want to embrace death? And the other disposition people have is they think if you're embracing death, that probably means you hate life, because most people who embrace death or who are looking forward to their death is probably because they're depressed or disinterested or disgusted with life. And therefore we find even in the world today so many suicides where people voluntarily embrace death, but not because they don't love life, they hate life. And therefore, but shall I tell you what, the vast majority are not able to love life without embracing death. The vast majority are not even able to embrace death, even though they don't love life. The vast majority of people can't do either of these. The vast majority of people don't know how to love life, and they don't know how to embrace death either. They don't know how to do any of these. But the Vaishnava simultaneously knows how to do both of these. They love life. They have a hunger. They have a passion. They have an enthusiasm. They wake up in the morning with purpose, with drive. I often say that the best alarm clock in the world is purpose. And so one way we can understand we're becoming more Krishna conscious is that we have an incredible love for life. We every day, every moment is valuable. Every interaction, every opportunity is an opportunity to develop love, to express love. And when we are living like this, then we understand that we are in Krishna consciousness, when we actually love life. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, who was at a concentration camp, he writes something incredible, because he was surrounded by death. He was surrounded by people who are just being gassed, tortured, people who are just waiting to die, and people who had everything taken away from them, not just their possessions, not just their relationships, but they had their dignity taken away from them. But he writes this amazing line. He says, everything can be taken away from a man. He says his possessions, his relatives, his relationships, even his dignity could be taken away from him. But the last human freedom is the freedom to be enthusiastic about life. The moment you've lost your enthusiasm for life, in that moment you've died. And he said that many people in that concentration camp died before they were even executed, because they died because they lost their enthusiasm for life. And so to find this enthusiasm and to nurture this enthusiasm is the very meaning of life. And therefore, most people don't know how to love life. And even few people know how to embrace death. Because for a Vaishnava, they understand death is not a full stop. Death is a comma. And death brings many, many gifts. And therefore, they love life because they have opportunity to serve. But when death comes and the call for death comes, they know how to embrace death, because they realize that is the gateway to a new service, a new opportunity, a new situation, and new services. And so they know how to also embrace death. And in Parikshit Maharaj, we see both of these, how he was so purposeful in his life. Throughout the first canto, we're hearing about how amazing he was as a ruler, how devotional he was as a ruler, and how alert he was in his duties and in his activities, and simultaneously Krishna conscious. And then in the end of the first canto, we hear about how Parikshit learns to also embrace death. And so loving life, embracing death is something that everyone can put up as a sutra somewhere in their immediate vision, to remind themselves that this is the life of a Vaishnava. And death brings its own gifts. we can say that there are certain gifts which the news of death brings. I was with Janakinath, and I remember when he moved back to the manor in his final stages of passing away from this world, then the OT, the occupational therapist, came to settle him in. And then he said I walked him out. Janakinath was in the room, and I walked the OT to the car park. And on the way there, I asked him, I said, okay, how long has he got? And he hesitated. I said, no, just say. And he said 3 months, maybe more. He said most likely less. It ended up less. And I walked back into the room where Janakinath was, and I was somewhat crestfallen, and he could see that, and he said 3 months, right? And I said, yeah. He said maybe more, could be less. And in that moment, I thought, what goes through the mind of someone who realizes they've only got 3 months to live? Like, it's so difficult to understand what must go through the mind of someone when that reality of death is so sure and so close. Of course, that's for all of us, because we know it could happen at any time. But in this case, it was very, very clear. And then I started having a conversation with Janakinath about this, about, the reality of death approaching. And then we started, we said, all right, let's sit down and let's brainstorm the gifts that come from knowing you're about to die. And then we naturally got into a conversation about Parikshit and the first canto. And the first gift we came out with is, we said, priority. The thing that death does better than anything else in the world is it helps you to remember what is important. It reminds you of the critical things that we have to do now before time runs out. When the reality of having to leave our possessions, our positions, our profiles and everything, when the reality that we have to leave all of that behind dawns, then it promotes all the other important things up the list. And therefore, the first gift of learning you're going to die, or for a Vaishnava, it gives you, it reorders your priorities. It reorders that list. And then we said not just priorities, but urgency. Death also reminds you that there's not just all these bunch of important things that you need to do in your life, but you need to do them now, because our chronic tendency is always to put things off till later. And so death brings not just priority, death brings urgency. In Parikshit's life, we also see how death brings humility. You see, Parikshit was so powerful. Parikshit was so influential. But when this young boy, Sukadev Goswami, he was just you could say he was a teenager. When he came, it's hard for us to imagine that here you have probably two personalities who, from the material point of view, are at complete ends of the scale. You have Parikshit, who's so powerful, influential, the complete emperor of the, of the universe, you can say, the whole empire. And then on the other hand, you have this like unknown mendicant who's like a young teenager. He's not even wearing clothes. And they come together. And the most amazing thing is that Parikshit finds the humility in himself to just say, like, instruct me. Can you tell me what I'm supposed to do at death? I mean, that kind of humility is hard for us to understand. Like now, just to be very honest with you, like now I'm a young sannyasi, so naturally, according to Varnashram, you have to give respect to a sannyasi. So like sometimes I have like people like double my age or old enough to be my father and showing respect to me, and it just feels so like it feels weird for me, like just very strange. And you can imagine, like, that's just a bit of distance, and how, in one sense, strange that feels. So how strange it would have been for Parikshit to just completely humble himself like that. But that's what death does. It brings about a humility that just humbles you to a degree like that. So death brings priority, it brings urgency, it brings humility. The other thing we talked about with Janakinath is that we said death brings clarity, because all the things we worry about, all the things we are in anxiety about, and all the things which dominate our consciousness, in the face of death, all of that kind of disappears. It disappears into like insignificance. It pales into insignificance. And therefore, to constantly be in touch with the reality of death helps us to just clear out all of that unnecessary noise which is blocking us from living life. And we also talked about how death brings immunity, because when you face the reality of death and you face that fear of death, then every other fear in your life, it doesn't hold the same grasp on you. It just doesn't feel, it doesn't bring any fear anymore, because what can maintain its fearfulness in the face of death? So the reason I'm sharing all of this with you is that definitely in spiritual culture, is a big part of spiritual culture is to meditate on death. And I think maybe that's something which many of us could do. It would really maybe help in life, just to take some moments. I mean, even Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita, Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi Dukha Dosh Anudarshanam, that one should meditate, contemplate, reflect, and instill the reality of birth, disease, old age, and ultimately death. That darshan, that vision, that clarifying thought process of registering that death will come is very, very much a part of a Vaishnava's life. And so I really like this, how we say in spiritual culture that we take 2 births and we take 2 deaths. The real birth occurs after your physical birth, and the real death should take place before your physical death. And this is what we say in spiritual culture, that you have 2 births, but the real birth takes place after your physical birth, because that's your spiritual birth. When you actually realize who you are, you get connected to a spiritual teacher who can guide you back to the ultimate goal of life. And the real death should take place before your physical death, which is the death of one's false ego, because then that prepares you to really die. So we take our physical birth so that we can ultimately find that spiritual birth. And we go through the ego death in order to ultimately embrace the physical death that will come. And that is basically the journey of life for a Vaishnava. And therefore, loving life and embracing death, I think, really is a mantra which we have to instill in our consciousness, and learning to love life every day. And I think it's a work in progress. Every day we have to wake up and think, what can I do today to fall in love with life in a deeper way? And what can I do today to begin to cultivate a mentality of embracing death whenever Krishna sends that? And as we live with these 2 mindsets, I think we actually achieve the real fruit, the real goal of human existence. And so Srila Prabhupada, in this beautiful purport, he just summarizes the philosophy very, very beautifully. And today I just wanted to share these thoughts with you, because we have to leave in about 35 minutes for another program. I think I'll stop there, because it's always nice to hear from all of you and hear what reflections, what comments, what contributions you'd like to make. So let me stop here and see what questions or what comments devotees would like to make. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Maharaj. As always, beautiful. Before anything else, we want to formally recognize the presence of His Holiness Patidra Damodara Maharaj. Maharaj, please accept our humble obeisances and glories to your lotus feet. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, you may unmute and share some words of wisdom before devotees in general ask questions or make any comments, please.
I just want to thank His Holiness KESHAVA Maharaj for his nectarian presentation. I don't really have any question, but I just want to show my appreciation that it's beautiful. It's very sweet, like you said, as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Nice to see you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
So devotees, if anyone has questions, comments, realizations, please, we may do that. The faster we do that, the better for all of us, because Maharaj has a very short time to leave. He has another engagement. Maharaj is very interesting. I looked at the 5 considerations when one is putting in any investment, and somehow they all start with R, you know. So there are 5 R's. And I was thinking, these investments, they appear to be, there is another R, which is rough.
Rough.
Yes, they may appear to be rough, but eventually it's going to pay off. So
Yes.
The window service may appear to be rough at times, if not all the time, to most of us, but eventually it's going to be paying off beautifully. So if we just endure. Mother Mitravinda Devi, please, you may unmute. Hare Krishna. Mitravinda Devi.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, please accept my obeisances. I'll go to Prabhupada. I just wanted to thank Maharaj for opening these doors of greater understanding effortlessly. That really and truly, just my perception, help people who are devotees of all faith systems, and I'm going to say that in a mood of non-sectarianism, which is one of the beautiful jewels in the crown of bhakti. But you open these doors that create understanding for everyone, for us as bhakti practitioners and devotees of bhakti to share this information, but also your reflections on death, dying, understanding it, embracing it, from a way that equates to compassion for everyone who ultimately we all go through it, but the education that relates to taking away the anxiety and the fear that is engulfing the world, everyone in every corner, in a way that makes it hard to hear this information, let alone prepare for it properly. I just wanted to thank you for being here and speaking, and I hope to hear you in as many places as possible and continuing on this wonderful platform. Thank you so much, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mataji. Really appreciate your kind words. Yeah, it said, one devotee once said to me that Krishna consciousness becomes more and more relevant as we get closer and closer to death. And that really struck me, you know, that, yeah, and as devotees, we should live very close to death. We should see that reality, as Krishna says in the Gita. And in that way, we will realize why and how Krishna consciousness is so relevant, not just because we fear death, but because we understand that death is an opportunity, a gateway to greater service, and therefore for me to prepare myself for that great moment in which I can make a transition into another life of service. So, yeah, thank you for that.
Hare Krishna. So, Kanaya Prabhu, please, you may unmute.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Prabhu,
Krishna.
so good to have your association here. I see lots of your wonderful postings. I never saw your lotus face. So thank you for sharing your lotus face today. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna. First of all, thank you so much, Maharaj. Every time I heard you on social media platforms, it's my honor to see you in live.
Nice to see you, Prabhu. Nice to see you.
Thank you so much for that live darshan. Maharaj, my question is this, that how we get to know that the service which we are doing is accepted by Krishna or not, because sometimes we are not doing it correctly. And sometimes, and how we know that are we advancing in bhakti or no?
Okay, so a few questions there. How do you know your service is the right service? How do we know we're pleasing Krishna? And how do we know if we're advancing?
Yes, Maharaj.
Therefore, our relationship with Krishna is always mediated by a spiritual master. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado. So if the spiritual master, if the Vaishnavas are satisfied, if the Vaishnavas appreciate your service and are pleased, then you can be sure bhagavat prasado, that Krishna is also pleased. Therefore, we are never performing devotional service in a vacuum. It's never just me and Krishna. You see, impersonalism takes place on different levels. And another form of impersonalism is not just impersonalism towards God, but impersonalism towards the devotees by just trying to cancel it and just say me and Krishna. So therefore, by hearing from the Vaishnavas, who are the mouthpiece of Krishna, we can understand if Krishna is satisfied. But the other way you'll know that Krishna is satisfied is because genuinely in your own heart, you will feel satisfaction when you render devotional service. And this is also a sign that your devotional service is effective. Because the Bhagavatam 11th canto gives a beautiful analogy. Bhakti pareshanu bhavo viraktir anyatra chaisha trika eka kalaha. Prapadyamana yathashnata shustusti pustik shud apayonughasham. This analogy says that when you eat, tushti, the first thing is you feel joy. Pushti, the second thing is you feel nourishment. And kshud apayo, the third thing is that you feel freedom from hunger. So the Bhagavatam says when you perform devotional service, tushti, you should feel some joy. You should feel some genuine happiness in the heart. Then pushti, you should feel nourished that I am experiencing Krishna. I feel Krishna in my life. I feel Krishna's touch. I feel Krishna's embrace. I feel Krishna's involvement. I feel Krishna's interest in my life. And third thing, shud apayo, just as you feel freedom from hunger when you render proper devotional service, freedom from material concerns, material anxieties, all of those things that used to hijack your consciousness. Now they are not sticking there so much, you know, things come, things go, it's more fluid, nothing is just stopping there. So like that, we can understand. It's a very, very scientific process. Is that okay?
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Maharaj, I want to ask one more question if you are okay.
Yeah, sure.
Maharaj, where I am living now, from last 2 years, here's no devotees association, even no any temple, no anything. I'm just living here alone. So I have just some of devotees like online. So how to secure ourselves from Maya in this condition, because it's very difficult here.
Yeah. Well, as you said, you have the online association. So the most important thing when you are with devotees is to have exchange of Hari Katha, like in the final line of this purport. Srila Prabhupada says, therefore, everyone should engage in Hari Katha to attain the ultimate goal of life. So you're not blocked. Remember, devotional service is apratihata. Apratihata means it's uninterrupted. No material situation can interrupt your devotional service. So what you should try to do, Kanaya Prabhu, is that rather than seeing all the things in this situation that you don't have, try to see all the unique opportunities that are arising that previously you may not have had, right? You have to try to be positive. You have to try to see the opportunities. In your mind, don't be in this mindset of thinking of all the things which are going to cause you to fail in this situation. In your mindset, think of all the wonderful facilities that you have that are going to make you a success, no matter how difficult it is, right? And just try to go in a more positive situation. Yes, you don't have physical association, desire it. Krishna in the future will arrange it. And until that time when he has arranged it, then just make other arrangements to connect and see that, okay, Krishna is giving me more time alone. So let me use that time alone to engage in deeper study, deeper sadhana, and rendering a services in a different way. Is that okay?
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
All right.
It was a wonderful answer. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj. Srimad Prabhu, did you have question? I saw you raise your hand up. Maharaj, there is a question in the chat room from Gita Nagri Ekofan. Okay, so the question is, Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you. A devotee asked, how do we know what is genuine contemplations versus what is the mind's rumblings? In general, daily as we go about our services in life. So the difference between genuine contemplation and the rumblings of the mind.
Okay, just give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, so the question is, what is the difference between genuine reflection and what is the difference between like ramblings or speculation, right? That's the question, is it?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay, I'm gonna again share something with you. This is from a course we did on journaling, and hopefully this will help you to answer the question. So Srila Prabhupada writes in the 4th canto of Bhagavatam that a devotee is as thoughtful as a non-devotee is speculative. So if you want to know what's the difference between genuine introspection and speculation, here are some things that will help you to realize the difference. Introspection is thinking in the mind, but with reference to Shastra. In speculation, you're not referencing anything except the mind and the perceptions. Therefore, when you genuinely think about what's going on in life, what's happening, how you feel about certain situations, but then you are bringing in Shastra. Introspection means to see your emotions through the Shastra. Then it becomes introspection. Otherwise, if it's just mind and perceptions, it's just speculation. It's not going to take you to any elevated vantage point. The second way you know the difference is that introspection leads to tangible, progressive, positive activity in the devotional sphere. In other words, the net result of genuine introspection is that you then go out and you do something. If you've just sat around thinking about something for an hour and there's nothing or no practical thing that comes out of it that makes a difference in your life, there's a good chance it may just be speculation. Introspection is always in relationship to Krishna. In other words, when you're deeply thinking about something and bringing Krishna into the equation, then it's introspection. But when you're just thinking about yourself, me, my problems, my desires, my situations, my future, and Krishna doesn't appear in the equation of that thinking, then there's a good chance it's speculation. Introspection, if it's done properly, is always accompanied by consultation. In other words, introspection means you think deeply about something, you try to digest it according to Shastra, you come with tangible outcomes, but then you check it with a Vaishnav. Speculation is just done in isolation. And therefore, it's just me, my thoughts, and my opinions, and that's it. And finally, the net result of introspection is that it will lead you to feeling progression and empowerment. It's progressive and empowering, whereas speculation is generally negative and limiting. And that's the telltale sign of the difference between the two. Yeah. So remember, a devotee should be, sometimes we think devotees should not think because thinking is being on the mental platform. No, a devotee should think, but not on the mental platform. A devotee should think, bringing in Guru Sadhu Shastra and be deeply introspective, because a devotee must be thoughtful. In fact, in the Bhagavatam, right in the beginning, it said that this Bhagavatam can be understood by the expert and thoughtful men. So we have to become very thoughtful. And there is a science to how that is done. Hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. So we'll go to Shrimad Prabhu, please, you may unmute. And devotees, especially if you're asking questions and it's possible, there is a clause, if it's possible, then you may turn on your videos, please. Shrimad Prabhu, please unmute and go ahead.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Okay. All right, I'm driving, so please tolerate the noise. Thank you very much, Maharaj, for your wonderful presentation. It's very enlightening. The considerations that you gave for investment, I try to follow. The advice you gave, and how you link them with bhakti. So I think the third one or the fourth one, the one about whether the investment is reachable. I couldn't really understand your example. So when we say that it is reachable at any time, some people from the womb, some people are about to die. Yeah. Now, my question is, I want you to clarify reaching it at any time and a whole life cultivation to be able to remember Krishna at the time of death. So after the verse, Yam Yam Bhakti Smaram Bhavam, 8:6, then Krishna said, then, in 8:7, he said, then you should do your work, your duty as a Kshatriya, always thinking of me. So which implies a whole life of cultivation to be able to remember Krishna at the point of death. So when we say that it is reachable at any time, so I want us to clarify this point, the two. You can explain both, how they
Yes.
combine.
Yes,
All right,
thank you. Thank you so much, Fu. Yes. Well, in the Bhagavatam, Prahlad Maharaj says, Kaumara acharit pragyo dharman bhagavatan iha durlabham manusham janma tad apyadruvamarthadam. He says that spiritual life should begin at the very beginning of life. Kaumara acharit pragyo. You should begin it at very early age because it requires that level of molding. So the best is to begin early. Because yes, whatever you remember at death is whatever you've cultivated throughout your life. And if you've cultivated many spiritual memories, spiritual impressions, then you'll have naturally a much better chance. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada wanted Gurukul, Srila Prabhupada wanted devotees to have the opportunity from the very beginning of their life to do that. So for all intensive purposes in the Krishna consciousness movement, we're trying to expose everyone as early, as quickly as possible, because the more time, the better. But the reality is that even if one takes it up later, if they take it up, divrena, bhakti yogena, with force, with intensity, with sincerity and seriousness, then they can also, they are not, we can say they are not disqualified or they are not out of reach. They have not missed the window. We can say it's harder. We can say they'll have to work harder, but it's not impossible because that's what the Shastra, that's what the Bhagavatam is telling us. So there's an ideal. And then there's also exceptional situations where even if those ideal conditions aren't met, someone can still attain perfection. And in that sense, bhakti doesn't strike anyone out. Although you're right, bhakti generally requires a lifetime, if not many lifetimes, of groundwork before it can actually work. But there is always that potentiality. Like Srila Prabhupada said, one may get an honorary degree, but one should not sit there their whole life thinking, maybe I will get the honorary degree. Probably better thing is get yourself into the classroom and start studying. And if somehow an honorary degree comes, otherwise at least you're studying and you can earn the degree. So that is our situation. But we have to remember that the honorary degree, Krishna's grace, that potentiality of bhakti to spark within someone very quickly is always there. And that should give hope to the devotees, no matter what's happened in their life, that they can take it up and still achieve perfection. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Maharaj. Govinda Prabhu will come to you in a very short while. But Maharaj, when you were discussing the 5 considerations, when you were talking about the jewel box.
Jewel box, yeah.
The jewel box. And you said the lid of the jewel box, which is like the caption telling you what could be found inside. You did say Gita 1855, and Harikanta Devi spotted that and said it should be 1865. Is that what you meant? You meant
1865 is what I said, no? I said
no,
1855?
You said 55, but
oh, I said
it's supposed
55.
to be
No, it's 1865 and 934 are mirroring
934.
each other. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, Hare Krishna. So, dear listeners, that was a misspoken statement. It's 1865. That's what Maharaj meant. And thank you, Harikanta Devi. So, Govinda Prabhu, please, you may unmute.
Hare Krishna Maharaj,
Hare
please accept my
Krishna,
respectful
Gaurav,
obeisances,
Maharaj,
all glories to your lotus feet.
Hare Krishna.
And thank you very much for this most wonderful presentation. You make me join Krishna consciousness again today. And, and you made me feel very fortunate to be part of this bhakti process. still talking about the jewel box. You explain many things in connection with the different practitioners. They're like all outside the box, but the real thing is within the box, which is the jewel within the box. And that jewel is the bhakti. And so that gives the deepest understanding, the deepest relationship with the Supreme Lord. And so one can be around the box. It's like there are bees. Sometimes we put honey in a bottle, and the honey will be circumambulating around the bottle, try to get a taste of the honey. And so you're just wondering how to get in there, but the bottle is well tight, so you cannot get in. So your explanation is just like that, like all these processes like jnana, karma, and all that, they try to get into the box. But ultimately, you have to open the box and actually touch the jewel within the box. And so Bhakti Yoga stands for that. Thank you very much. So, but the question is, so when we say Bhakti, the English translation of Bhakti is called devotion or love. So what is are there different type of love, or love is one? Because I'm asking this because if Bhakti is a real thing, and the Astanga yogis, the Karma yogis, and all other yoga processes, they are also, they think that they are cultivating love. They think what they are doing is love. So also the other religious bodies like Christians and Muslims and all others, they think they are cultivating love, and they believe they are cultivating love, and they believe that they have that love, they have acquired it. And so could you please explain the difference? What is this love? What is this devotion?
Wow.
That is my
Yes, thank you,
that's my
Govindapu. Yeah, you asked a very deep question.
my first question, but there's a second question. I would like you to finish this one, please.
Okay, yes, you've asked a very deep question. So what is this love actually? Actually, the word bhakti comes from the Sanskrit root bhaj. And bhaj, one meaning that's given is to share. So sometimes some commentators, what they say is bhakti actually means to give your heart, to give the most value, to give your very self. To give your heart means to give yourself. And in that sense, like Krishna says, or Vishnu says in Bhagavatam, Sadhavo hridayam mayam sadhunam hridayam tvaham madanyete na jananti naham tebhyo managapi. The Lord says, I am in the hearts of my devotees. The devotees, they are in my heart. I know nothing but them, and they know nothing but me. This is love that you install, like we say in the beginning of Chaitanya Charitamrita, install the Lord in the innermost chambers of your heart. In other words, get to the most confidential place of your entire being. And then you are able to experience what love is. Sometimes when we're talking to newcomers, we say like this: you begin Krishna consciousness by giving the first day of the week. The first day of the week means Sangha. On a Sunday, you go to the Sunday program, and that's spiritual life. The second part of spiritual life is you give the first hour of every day. So that means after you've come on a Sunday program, the next thing you're supposed to do after you get association is do sadhana. Give the first hour of your day. But then we say the next part of spiritual life is you're supposed to give the first portion of every plate. In other words, you start offering prasadam and you do some active service. But then we say the next thing you're supposed to do is give Krishna the first consideration in every decision. So every decision in your life, the first consideration is, how is this going to help me to serve Krishna better? And the final consideration is to give Krishna the first place in your heart. Right? So this is how spiritual life goes. Whereas entering into a deeper and deeper, more confidential. First, it's just the first day of the week. Then it's the first hour of the day. Then it's the first portion of the plate. Then it's the first consideration in the decision. But then it's the first place in your heart. That is love. When naturally the Lord is coming there because there's nothing else has become more important. And love and the way it's expressed it. In English, we have one word, love. Did you know in Sanskrit, there's over 90 words for love? Because there's different types of love, different intensities of love, different flavors of love, and different relationships of love. And therefore, love takes place in many, many ways, in many, many forms, according to the personality. But bhakti yoga is that which allows us to get to that deepest part of love. And so yes, and just to comment on what else you said, like in karma yoga, yes, they are developing love, but love is not their priority. Their priority is how to make sure they rid themselves from karmic reaction. That's the karma yogi's first priority. But because they're doing it through service, they're going to get some love. The jnana yogi's first priority is not love. The jnana yogi's first priority is liberation. But because they're connecting to the Lord, some love will come. But the bhakti yogi's first consideration is not any of these things. The bhakti yogi's first consideration is, how can I give my heart to Krishna? Indradyumna Maharaj once said it nicely. He said, all the austerities, all the service, all the sadhana, all the yatras, all the activities we're doing in devotional service are just so that one day we can sit down in one corner of the room, chant one name of Krishna, and experience one genuine teardrop fall from the eye. If we come to that point of developing some love, genuine love, anya bhilashita ashunyam, with no other motivation behind it, that is bhakti. So, but your question is so vast, I don't know. I just had to say a few things on it.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very much.
And can I just share one other thing, just what you inspired me, because you were talking about the jewel box, and you were saying like how, you know, you just triggered a thought within me that like, and I just want to share this with you because I think it's also appropriate for your question about love. Like I was talking about the jewel box, and the idea is that the Shastra, what we're trying to do is get beyond the base, get beyond the lid, get beyond all the other things, and ultimately get to the essence of what that Shastra is teaching us, which is bhakti, right? But one thing I also want to share with you is that the Krishna consciousness movement is also like a jewel box, right? And what it is that different people interact with the Krishna consciousness movement on different levels. And some people deal with the kind of the box of the institution. And I say that's the identity, the social identity of the Krishna consciousness movement. And for me, that's the box. But then when we get to a deeper part of the Krishna consciousness movement, it's not so much that the Krishna consciousness movement is a social identity, but it's almost like the velvet that you find inside the jewel box, which is like, I would say, like the process that the Krishna consciousness movement is giving you, the opportunities to serve, the opportunities to hear and chant and the process of Krishna consciousness. But the very core of the Krishna consciousness movement is Krishna, the person. And so sometimes I feel as devotees, we should be very, very careful, because sometimes we only relate to sometimes the external parts of the Krishna consciousness movement, and we forget that is actually meant to connect us to Krishna, the person. That's the real jewel inside, and that the movement and the mechanics of the movement and the arrangements and the different things are the vehicle through which we give that bhakti. But the bhakti, we shouldn't forget that that is the real thing. Anyway, so yeah, I just want to share that as well.
Well, thank you so much, Maharaj. Maharaj, I am looking at the time, and this is the challenge, because when you have something sweet, it's very difficult to let go of it. And devotees are drinking the nectar through their transcendental ears, but you also have another engagement. So I don't know if you still have a few minutes.
I'm seeing Nitya Shekhar there, and he patiently had his hand up for
Yes.
a long time. So we can maybe take his question.
Okay, Hare Krishna. So Nitya, Prabhu, please unmute.
Hare Krishna. I hope you can hear me nice and
Yes,
clearly.
yes, we can hear
Yes.
you.
Yes, thank you so much, Maharaj. It's always nice hearing you share with such enthusiasm. I guess we also get infected. It's very, very nice. I appreciate it. Maharaj, I had a question in regards to something you mentioned in the beginning of your talk. And you were mentioning how expert Parikshit Maharaj Shukadev Goswami was as a preacher, and how he was able to give information, not just that which was relevant to Parikshit Maharaj, but also simultaneously relevant to all the other persons that were there. And seeing that we are sharers and are attempting to be sharers of bhakti and trying to give Krishna consciousness or our understanding of it in different ways, how can we be able to get this element of or level of understanding of the people that are there, and be able to give them what they just need, what's right for them, in a similar mood or fashion that Shukadev Goswami does with Parikshit Maharaj and the rest of the sages.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think I find that there are two ways in which we are really able to reach the hearts and the minds of people. One is a very mystical way, and one is a more practical way. Let me start with the mystical. When one is very, very connected, and when one is very, very desirous to help others, and one is embodying a real mood of compassion, then what happens is they become very, very connected to the super soul. And therefore, even though Sukadev Goswami was almost like completely aloof from the world, it's almost as he knew what was going through everyone's mind. And it almost seems as though he was just empowered by Krishna to say the right things at the right time. So often before we're about to give a speech, one of the most traditional prayers is that the speaker says, "My dear Lord, allow the right words to come at the right time, in the right mood, with the right motivation behind them." And in that way, we're praying very much that we can allow our ego to move out of the way and let Krishna speak. And because Krishna is in everyone's heart, Krishna knows what everyone needs to hear. Now that's very mystical, and some people, we have to try for that connection. But the more practical way is that what we try to do as devotees is always keep our fingers on the pulse. I find that the time I spend on the Vyasasana and giving classes is empowered by the time I spend sitting one-to-one with devotees, hearing what they're going through, hearing what obstacles are there, hearing their realizations, their challenges. I feel that the moment I keep going from talk to talk to talk, but I don't get to time to spend with individual devotees to hear what their human story is in Krishna consciousness, then I feel I begin losing touch with reality. And so I think it's really important for us to hear from each other, to know what's happening on the ground in people's lives. Because the reality is, if you address people's needs, interests, and concerns, and then you bring in Shastra, and then you deliver it with a heart of compassion, that is an unbeatable combination. If you're relevant, if you're authentic in terms of what you're delivering, and if you do it with a heart which is actually loving, by Krishna's mercy, you'll be a powerful preacher. It's as simple as that. But oftentimes we're missing part of that triangle somewhere along the way. So just stay in touch with the people, be close to the people. That's why I love doing Sankirtan book distribution for so many years, because every day you're speaking to 300, 400 people, you know, and you really get to know what is on people's minds. What are they concerned about? And the preacher needs to know. Therefore, even Srila Prabhupada, when he went to Butler, Pennsylvania, whenever I say Pennsylvania, I think Transylvania. I was like, am I saying this wrong? I always think of Transylvania. It's not Pennsylvania. Prabhupada said, for the first 2 months, I was just observing the American people. He said, factually, I was just observing them. What are their habits? What are their concerns? How do they live? What are they all about? Even Srila Prabhupada was getting his fingers on the pulse to understand. So yeah, we need to know what's going through the minds of the people. Because you've heard me say this, if you want to take someone somewhere, first you have to meet them where they are. And so Sukadev Goswami does that brilliantly, because he's not just like, oh, Parikshit's ready and I know the truth, boom, let's just say it there and save time. He's like, no, let's take everyone on a journey. And chapters 1, 2, and 3 of the second canto basically describe the whole yoga ladder. If you look closely, that's basically what's happening. Hope that helps.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Maharaj. I am very, very much appreciative of myself today, because I have held on so tight to my bothersome questions, because so many devotees had many questions, beautiful ones, intelligent questions. And as we speak, there are still a few more questions in the chat room, but unfortunately, Maharaj cannot take them today. So,
Sahadev Prabhu, sorry to interrupt you there.
yeah, no.
Are you comfortable with me making a little advertisement here? It's all in line with the principles of Krishna consciousness, I promise you.
Please do, because actually there was one
Yeah.
About your Gita. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to put a link on the chat. And if anyone is interested, this Thursday, we are beginning a brand new course on the Gita. It's called Bhagavad Gita Unlocked. And what it is, it's yeah, put it there. So what it is, it's 8 sessions every Thursday evening. We're going to be going through the Bhagavad Gita chapter by chapter, but to give you an expanse and a quick walk through how the Bhagavad Gita is the ultimate book of self-development in the deepest spiritual way. So if any of you are interested, I think most of you will know about the information I'm going to talk about, but it might be interesting for you to join. It's because, you know, perhaps it may help you in your preaching to share the Bhagavad Gita with others, because I'm a transcendental, well, I don't know, transcendental, I'm a thief, hopefully transcendental one. And I take from a lot of places and I try to weave it together. So you'll get a lot of great realizations from the devotees. And if you have any new people who you feel like they might want to learn the Bhagavad Gita, then they can just go onto this link. If you just go onto that link, Kanaya Prabhu and anyone else, and you just put that link into your browser, www.thinkgita.org/unlocked, then what will happen is it will take you to a landing page, and that page will basically explain to you like how you can join the program. So that was just my little plug for today, our little service to you. And thank you for allowing me to do some small service for you today. It's really always an honor to be with you all.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Maharaj. And on this note, we're going to humbly request all the devotees to kindly unmute, and we are going to chant the loudest Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. But Maharaj, before you go, when you're talking about the jewel itself is in the middle, protected by the lid and the base. I was thinking, wow, Krishna is so sweet because the two most important organs in the body are the brain and the heart. I mean, they are all in the cage, you know. Krishna is protected. The brain is in the skull, the heart is in the rib cage. They're all getting protected. So thank you for sharing that.
That's a nice analogy, actually, because karma yoga is like the legs. It's like how to move in this world. Jnana yoga is like the brain, like how to navigate all the complexity. And then the heart is right in the middle, like what we ultimately seek to unleash. So we'll credit that commentary to you, Sahadev Prabhu.
Oh, no.
100 years down the line, they'll be quoting you for that illumination and insight.
Hare Krishna. So, dear devotees, please kindly unmute and we all chant the loudest Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Jai.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare
Hare Ram,
Hare
Hare
Ram,
Ram,
Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare.
Panchakarpata Rubhyascha,
Chakapatarubhyascha, Kripasnabhyascha, Bhakti-talam Bhavnebhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha.
Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinde ki jai.
Jai.
His Holiness Swami Bhagavan Keshava Swami Maharaj ki.
Jai.
Thank you, Maharaj.